that basically shows you, in this case, I had one result report, and then you can kind of see the overview of your different results reports from the K8sGPT operator inside of Grafana dashboard. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me here for another YouTube video. My name is Anais Urlis. I'm the open source developer advocate at K8sGPT. Now, this is another end-to-end tutorial where I share all of the different steps that you need to get started with a tool. Usually I share videos related to Kubernetes and the cloud native ecosystem, and in this tutorial we're going to cover a new tool called K8sGPT that started about 2 months ago from an amazing group of experienced cloud native engineers. I'm going to show you how you can start it. What is the tool? How do you use it? When do you use it? We're going to deep dive. Well, I'm going to provide you with an overview of the CLI as well as of the Kubernetes operator that you can use to also install K8sGPT inside of your cluster. And I'm going to detail the difference between the CLI tool as well as the in-cluster operator. We're also going to look at how you can expand the tool with integrations. All of this is covered in this video, so this is a bit of a longer video. If you're curious about specific sections, then do check out the chapters of this video. Also, if you prefer the written tutorial instead of the YouTube video tutorial, then do head over to my blog where you can see the written version of this tutorial with all of the different steps, all of the different commands that I followed. Let's get started. So what is K8sGPT? K8sGPT gives Kubernetes superpowers to everyone. K8sGPT is a tool for scanning Kubernetes clusters, diagnosis and triage issues in simple English. It has SRE experience codified into its analyzers and helps to pull out the most relevant information to enrich it with AI. So it's basically a tool that pulls information, for example, from logs out of your cluster, and then kind of modifies the information to some extent, kind of filters the information from the cluster, and sends the filtered information to AI backends, to machine learning models in the backend, to then receive kind of explanations and, I guess, more detailed analyzed information back, and then displays them to you. So it's basically, instead of you looking at the errors from the cluster, K8sGPT is able to help you identify the most important information of those errors and provide further information on how you can solve and fix those errors of your workloads. Now, it's not just sending the data to an AI backend, such as OpenAI, but it's also before that filtering the information, so only the most relevant information are first of all sent and then displayed in the end. Now, K8sGPT has been started by several smart people in the cloud native ecosystem. It started about 2 months ago. It's already used by 2 projects, 2 organizations in production. It is moving very, very fast, and I have contributed, or have started actually, the documentation and have since contributed to the documentation. Now, if my internet wouldn't be that slow. Now, K8sGPT comes both as a CLI tool, so you can find out how to get started with the CLI tool in the Getting Started guide, and then it has an in-cluster Kubernetes operator. If you're new to Kubernetes operators, do check out my tutorial, my introduction to Kubernetes operators, for more information before you actually start using Kubernetes operators. Now, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you both how to get started with the CLI tool as well as with the Kubernetes operator. At this point, you might want to get started and open up as well the GitHub organization and give us a start on GitHub. It would mean a lot to myself as well as to all of the contributors who made this tool possible. Additionally, it would be great if you could upvote us on Product Hunt to give the project more visibility. Now, here's already how you could install the CLI tool. So that's one way to install it. We have several different installation options in our documentation. So as you can see, there are lots of different installation options as well as for Windows if you're a Windows user. Also, if you're using different Linux-based distributions, there are different options on how you could go ahead and install those with different package managers. Now, if you're like me and you're, for example, on a Mac and you're using Homebrew, you can use the Brew installation. You could also use the Brew installation, I believe, if you're using Homebrew for Linux, for Windows, or Linux for Linux. for example, through WSL, Windows Subsystem Linux. You could also use that installation. You would have to have Homebrew installed for that to work. Now we're going to follow this installation, so you can go ahead and first you have to do brew tab and then K8sGPT AI, K8sGPT. No, I've already added that, but that would be the first step that you have to follow. And then from there you can install it with brew. Now I already have it installed. I don't believe there's a new version available since I have last installed it, but let's just double check that. Yep. And then once you have it installed, you just want to make sure that GPT version, that it works, that you have access to a version inside of your CLI, inside of your terminal. Now, from there, you could look at the different commands. Just help to get started, right? Like that would be one option to get started with the different commands. We also have in the documentation and the reference and the CLI overview, we have all of our different commands listed to help you get started with those. Now those are based on the CLI tool, so you can get started here with the different commands. Now, first of all, to use K8sGPT, you need an AI backend. We have different providers. You can find the different providers listed here in the documentation as well. So you do check that out if you want to use one of the other providers. We have Azure OpenAI, local AI, and then you can use a fake AI kind of thing as well, that I haven't tried it. No, we are going to use OpenAI in this tutorial. Let's get back. So for that, you want to go ahead and say K8sGPT and then generate. And this will actually open up the K8sGPT website. And on the OpenAI website, there is a section within your, if you go to your accounts and you want to be an OpenAI, not ChatGPT, right? But you need kind of an OpenAI account, and then you can go to your user, to your personal account settings, and you can go to view API keys, and then you're here provided with your different API keys. Now I have a K8sGPT key and then a K8sGPT Operator key. So you would want to create a new secret, a new API key. So let's test one. Create a test one. I'm going to delete that later. You want to copy that, and then you want to say K8sGPT auth to authorize that new backend. Now you have to add a new provider. You can also list your existing ones. K8sGPT auth list. And then, as you can see, I already have OpenAI added. Now you can say K8sGPT auth remove OpenAI. So in that case, I have removed it. And then I can add OpenAI, and I'm providing here, it just copy pasted my key here. OpenAI added to the AI backend provider list. So you need your API key in order to make K8sGPT ultimately work, because it has to send data to OpenAI, to that backend. Now we have everything. Next, what we can do is we can install a Kubernetes deployment to our cluster. Now I'm already connected here to a Kubernetes cluster. I'm gonna create a new cluster. Dash name and then K8s demo. Now I'm going to use a blank new cluster. I'm just using a simple local Kubernetes kind cluster. It's a one node Kubernetes cluster that's going to run in Docker, inside of a Docker container. And I'm going to use that for this entire demo. Now you want to create a new cluster or use an existing cluster that you have kind of access, authorization access to analyze in more detail. So I'm just going to create a cluster. And once I've created the cluster, I can go ahead and I can install a new deployment inside of the cluster that will fail, that we can then analyze. Now, why will this deployment fail? I have here some example resources that I will use in this demo as well. Now, this repository is linked below as well. You can find this repository also up here under my name, my GitHub account, and then K8sGPT tuts for tutorials, and you can find the different resources here. Again, the link for this repository is below. Now, in this repository, I have a deployment YAML manifest, as we can see here, and that deployment YAML manifest is gonna spin up 3 instances of an Nginx container. The read-only root file system is true. However, for Nginx to work, it has to be false. So this container is gonna go into a crash loop backoff, ultimately. So let's wait until this is finished creating. So it just finished creating. Now in the cluster, let's go get namespace. We don't have any namespaces set up just yet. What's going on right now? Computer is very slow. I think OBS and Docker is slowing everything down, so apologies for that. Now we're gonna create a new, with kubectl, create new namespace. We're gonna call it a demo namespace. And then we're gonna kubectl apply our deployment YAML manifest in the demo namespace. Then we can say if either kubectl get all in namespace demo, and we see here our deployment now running with our replica set. Now all those pods are in pending state, as you can see, which is not ideal. Oh, but more parts are in pending state. Let me remove some components. So you can see right now this is a very broken cluster. It's a bit too broken. Okay, so all I did was just stop some of my containers running in Docker at the moment. So this had enough space to actually run. As you can see, our deployment that we've just installed is not happy. It's crashing. Now, why is it crashing? What you could do is you can do a describe of a pod, of a container, and you can see some information, right? But it will just tell you warning, back off, restarting failed container. And it has access to the image, so you wouldn't necessarily know what's going on here or what steps to take, especially if you're completely new to this. Now, this is a really simplified example, right? But if you're new to Kubernetes, right, you wouldn't necessarily know how to debug this. Why is it failing? Now, what we can do to get further information on why our deployment is not working as it's supposed to, we can go ahead and say K8sGPT analyze. And analyze has several different flags that you can add, which we will look at in a second. Now, if I just run K8sGPT analyze, it will go ahead and it will analyze everything that's throwing errors, that's unexpected within the cluster, and will just report on that. So it's telling me that basically all of my Nginx deployments, all of my different pods are not working as expected. So they all have a backoff. Now at this point, it's not giving me additional information. However, what I can do to get further explanations is I can explain the problem to me, or ask K8sGPT to explain the problem to me. And then dash explain and ask K8sGPT to explain the problem to me. Now it will analyze the errors that it finds inside of the cluster, and it will provide more contextualized information on those errors, as well as different steps that I could take to receive further information. So in this case, we have here the demo Nginx deployment, restarting failed container, the container Nginx pod, blah, 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 failed and is being restarted with backoff delay of 2 minutes. Check the logs for the container, fix any issues of the Nginx container, like of the container itself, update the Kubernetes deployment configuration with fixed container code, redeploy the Nginx container with the updated configuration to resolve issues. Now, in my case, it's clearly a configuration problem, as I know, but if you wouldn't know that, what you would do at first is you would look at the logs of your failed containers. And here it actually tells me, oh, read-only file system, that's throwing the error, and then I can go to my configuration here and say, okay, let's try it with false and see how it responds. Now, if I want to have it as true, I would have to change the container code to make that work. But basically, K8sGPT told me, hey, check the logs of your container. Check the logs as a first step. Now I did that, and now I can redeploy the deployment, the updated deployment file, deployment in namespace demo. And now, after I've updated that configuration, and I've redeployed it, I can look at my cluster again, and now all of my pods are actually running. So let's assume, this is a really basic scenario, right? But let's just assume that I am completely new to Kubernetes and I don't know that I'm supposed to check the logs in case of loop back off, right? Like that's something that you have to figure out at first, that if errors are thrown, check the events of the container, then check the logs, then check the most recent deployment, check your configuration, all those different steps that are involved. That's something that you have to learn at the beginning, right? Now, and K8sGPT in this case tells me the different steps. Now, there are obviously more complex scenarios, more complex examples. This is just a demo environment. Just reiterating on that it can be made more complex. Anyway, so this is the most straightforward example, I guess. Now, what we can do as well is if you have, let's say, K8sGPT analyze --help. If you have a large cluster, a large environment, you want to specify the namespace in which K8sGPT is supposed to run. You also might, if want to anonymize anything that's sent to the AI backend. So what you could do as well is, as part of your analyze command, you can say anonymize my data. So, for example, OpenAI doesn't have the information of my company and the errors of the infrastructure of my company sent to them. Now, if I run this command, in my case, it will show me no problems detected because I updated my deployment. So I want to go back to true. I want to reapply it to reintroduce the errors, right? Deployment in namespace daemon. And once it's configured, it should throw errors again. Yep. And then I can run the K8sGPT analyze command with anonymize. And I again get like of this one part that's currently failing. Oops. That one part, I get the information. Now the other parts should start eventually failing as well. And that's kind of what you can do there. Again, there are multiple other things you can do as well with the analyze command. But we're not going to go into all of the different ones. Do check them out if you are curious. Now, what I want to look at next is how can we actually expand K8sGPT as a tool? Because ultimately the value of most tools in the CNCF and the cloud native ecosystem, in general, most open source tools, is by how well they integrate with other tools in their respective field. So K8sGPT has something called integrations. With integrations, you can add additional functionality to K8sGPT. So what K8sGPT does is it has different analyzers in the source code. So if we head over to the source code, here's K8sGPT. You can go here to, at least they used to have like an analyzer. Commands, analyze go, no. Where are the analyzers? Generate, filters maybe? No, where did they have it? See, as you can see, I don't really know the source code that well, but they basically have analyzers that are there to take the information from your cluster and then filter out the specific results and analyze the output or the input of the error messages. Now, what you can do is you can use specific filters for your different resources. So, for example, if I say K8sGPT filters list, I can see my different filters. Now, in my case, I've used the pod filter. I could also use, for example, the service filter, the deployment filter to see what's wrong with my deployments, with my services. Depending on what's wrong with my cluster, I will want to use different filters, right? Now, I want to add a custom filter as part of my integrations. So I can say K8sGPT integrations. And then help first. So, and then I can list the different integrations that are available for K8sGPT. Integrations list. Now, at the moment, there are not many integrations available. There's Trivy available. Trivy is an all-in-one open source security scanner for the cloud native space for all of your scanning needs. Now, it's a completely open source tool. You don't have to sign up. You don't send Aqua-Security, who's behind the tool, any data. You can use it as much or as little as you like. We wouldn't know about it. Now, Trivy produces scan reports on different information. It can scan container images, file systems, Git repository, virtual machine, configurations files such as Kubernetes, Terraform, etc. And Trivy also has an operator that can install Trivy inside of a Kubernetes cluster. And K8sGPT is basically using the Trivy operator to install to be installed inside of the cluster and then produce scan reports. So we can say integrations and then activate Trivy. And this is going to install Trivy, the Trivy operator inside of your cluster now. So if we go to K9s, for example, we can see that the Trivy operator is running in our default namespace and it's spinning up all of these vulnerability reports. Now, the vulnerability reports are in-cluster scans of your different container images that you have available. So here we have our different vulnerability scans and they will produce vulnerability reports. Vulnerability report. Here we go, if we reload it. So for instance, we have here our different issues. We should also receive eventually a vulnerability report for our Nginx application. So I think that will come in a second. So this is how you would add an integration. Now, once you've added an integration, you can then use the filters from it. So you can say K8sGPT filters list. And now that we have added the integration, we have a new filter called vulnerability report. And we can use that filter as part of our K8sGPT analyze command. So we can say K8sGPT analyze -- filter vulnerability report. And that will actually use the information from the vulnerability report, such as the different issues, the different security issues reported in the vulnerability report, to provide information on your cluster. Now, as you can see, there are only critical security issues, critical vulnerabilities reported that are found as part of all of the vulnerability reports in that case, across all your namespaces. Why are we only reporting or showing you the critical vulnerabilities here? Well, sometimes, depending on your cluster size, you might have hundreds of thousands of security issues, including unknowns and low vulnerabilities, and you don't necessarily want to pay attention to those. So in this case, K8sGPT is just reporting on the critical issues. Now, if you want to find more information on that issue, for example, you can open up this link and that will provide you with further information on that issue that's detected within your cluster. Now, this is as far as the CLI goes, or like as I will explain the CLI tool. If you are working on a project and you would love for K8sGPT to integrate with it, I'm sure you can write an integration based on a Trivy integration. The Trivy integration is basically an example integration on how other people can then add their own integrations. Also, when you're going through the project and when you're using the documentation, it would mean a lot to us. It would help us a lot if you could create an issue for anything that's unclear or anything that didn't make sense as it might have supposed to be. So it's likely the documentation and the project, the way that it's displayed and the way it tells you to use it versus you using it wrong. There's no such thing as you using it wrong. So yeah, if you want to get started to contribute to the project, the first contribution that would be really amazing, would help us a lot. It's just you sharing your experience on using the tool, based on which we can improve the documentation and the tool itself. Now, the CLI tool is really there for ad hoc scans of your cluster that you have access to, likely from your terminal. It's not really, I guess, it's not really planned to use it in your CI/CD pipeline. I guess you could eventually, or you could integrate it into your CI/CD pipeline. There's nothing really stopping you. But the CLI tool, in short, is really used for ad hoc scans. If you want to have continuous scans of your in-cluster resources, of the resources running within your cluster, what you would want to do is install the K8sGPT operator. Now, the K8sGPT operator, let's head back to the documentation. You can find, first of all, the operator overview here of like the design of the operator. It's basically an operator that runs in your cluster. And once you have the operator installed as like the controllers, you give it a configuration file for K8sGPT. Now, based on that configuration file, it will then scan, for example, your deployment inside of your cluster. And where is it? Okay, there's no deployment display. It will scan a deployment inside of your cluster, and then it will generate metrics that can be, for example, scraped for Prometheus by Prometheus. And those metrics are also displayed as part of like a Kubernetes YAML manifest, as part of a results report. We will look at all of that in detail. Now, you will know if the operator is installed properly if you have at least 2 pods running. One for them is for the operator, and then the K8sGPT deployment also has to run inside of your cluster. And you need to have the K8sGPT CRD, which is kind of a configuration file for it installed as well. So you need all of those different components. I will walk you through them to make it effective, to communicate it properly. So where can you find the installation? The installation is in the Get It Started section. If you want to customize the operator, for example, by feeding metrics automatically to Prometheus, check out these different parameters that you can set as well. There are other parameters that you can set as well. Where is it? Here is the values YAML manifest for the operator, and you can find the different values that you can set. For example, you can add a Grafana dashboard, you can enable the service monitor. Both of those things we will do now as well in our installation. So going back to our documentation, we want to add first the registry for K8sGPT. Here's the chart registry, so Helm knows about it. To follow this section, you need to have Helm installed, so make sure you have Helm running inside of your cluster. Have it installed locally. So you have access to Helm, and then you can add the repository. Now, I already added the repository. You want to run generally a Helm repo update to make sure that all of the information that you have locally is up to date. Now, once you have configured everything, you can either install like just straight away the K8sGPT operator. However, I want to set some specific values, and for that I have created a values YAML manifest. Again, you can find it in the repository link below. This values YAML manifest, what it has, it's the service monitor enabled true and Grafana dashboard enabled true, and it will overwrite the values that you can find here in the values YAML manifest on GitHub. It will overwrite this value and it will overwrite that value. So the way that we're going to install it is not through this command, but actually, let me get the command. Here we go. So Helm install, and then the release is K8sGPT Operator, in namespace K8sGPT Operator System, and it's supposed to create a namespace, and then we pass in the values YAML manifest through the -- values flag, and we just install inside of a cluster. Oh, okay. Talking about experience and talking about issues. For this to work, and that's something that I've experienced with other operators before, and that's why I know this error message. For this to work, you need to have Prometheus installed already. So we actually have to install Prometheus before if you want to have Prometheus, if you want to have those values enabled. So this is a learning on my end, or remembering on my end. So we want to add the Prometheus community chart. It's the Helm Prometheus stack chart that installs both Prometheus for accessing metrics and Grafana to make pretty dashboards. And now we're going to run a Helm repo update again. And then we can install the chart, but I'm not actually going to install it in the K8sGPT Operator System namespace. I want to install it into the prom namespace. And I'm going to say -- create namespace. So, and this is going to install both Prometheus and Grafana inside of my dashboard. Now, this chart might take a few seconds to actually install. Just bear that in mind. It's nothing weird. It's nothing you did wrong. Okay, and now we have that chart installed. We can look at the resources here. And if I go to namespace, we have now the prom namespace. And in the prom namespace, all of the resources are now spinning up. That's cool. And we can now go ahead and we can actually add the K8sGPT operator. Now, it needs basically the Kubernetes custom resource definitions from Prometheus to install the service monitor for K8sGPT. Otherwise, Kubernetes doesn't know what a service monitor is and it can't install a service monitor. So that's why it has its dependency to have Prometheus installed in that case before. Now, if you're following the documentation as here, you don't need to install Prometheus, you don't need to install Grafana or anything beforehand. Now that we have, however, Grafana and Prometheus installed through the Prometheus stack operator chart, we can install K8sGPT, the operator. We're going to create the K8sGPT operator system namespace, and we're going to apply the values over here as stated earlier. Install, release, and this is super quick. What a difference. And this will spin up the K8sGPT operator controller manager. K8sGPT operator controller manager inside of our cluster. Now with that, K8sGPT won't work straight away because we need a few other resources as well in addition to that. In addition to this, we need here our secret, basically a Kubernetes secret that has the OpenAI token. Now you can either use the OpenAI token that we've generated earlier. So we can, for example, say export. Let's do that. Export and an OpenAI token, and we set it equal to our OpenAI token. And then we can generate the secret based on, where is it? Based on this command. So I'm going to run the command, create secret, generic, and this is the secret name from the OpenAI key in my default namespace, however. So since K8sGPT is not running in my default namespace, I'm going to install it in the K8sGPT operator namespace. And my puppy wants attention, so I'm going to give her some attention before she's getting mad at me. Okay, she has a carrot, she's happy now. Update on the puppy. Now, what else do we need? We need here K8sGPT deployment resource. Now, the K8sGPT deployment resource basically tells K8sGPT which version, or like the operator, which version of K8sGPT to spin up, which version to use, and which backend to use as well as where it can find the secret, which is the secret. So this is the name of the secret, and this is the key that has to be installed. Now, I have created this file, the K8sGPT resource, as a YAML manifest, and I'm going to apply it now to my K8sGPT operator system namespace. So I'm going to say kubectl apply file K8sGPT resource, and then to namespace K8sGPT operator system. Now this should spin up another pod, as you can see here, another container inside of the K8sGPT operator system namespace, and with that I have everything running inside of my cluster. Now, as we can see, my two Nginx deployments are still crash loop back off. If I delete this one, it might also go into crash loop back off. No, it actually isn't. Anyway, experimentation here. So now that everything is running, what we want to do is we want to access our service. And then here we want to port forward, first of all, our Prometheus service. Where is it? From Grafana Prometheus operator. So we're going to port forward it. You can find the port forwarding commands also in the blog post link below. So we're going to port forward it. That one first, localhost 1990. Now here on Prometheus, you can go to status and then you can go to targets. And you have to make sure that K8sGPT, basically here, this target is there. The release K8sGPT operator controller manager metrics monitor target. That it's up. That's what you want to make sure on Prometheus. Now, once everything is installed for the K8sGPT operator, you can go to results, right? And you refresh results. Why is it not? Namespace. K8sGPT operator system. Results. Okay. No results yet. Maybe they're not scanned. Nothing is scanned yet. Anyway, so what we can do, however, is we can go to our service and we can open Grafana. So we also want to look at our dashboard, right? Now we have metrics here. Now the login for Grafana is admin, and then whatever name the release name you gave the Prometheus Stack Operator Child installation, in my case it was prom, and then dash operator. So if you named it Prometheus, then it would be Prometheus dash operator as the password. Now once we're logged in, we can head over to dashboards, and you should find in dashboards the K8sGPT overview dashboard. Now this will only be the case if you used this file, like if you set these values here to true, then, well, the dashboard value to true, then you will find the dashboard. You will only find metrics if you actually set the metric value to true. Now, as you can see, I don't have any reports actually right now in my cluster. Let's see if reports are gonna be generated, but this is ultimately how it works. You will find if when there are results from the operator, they're here. I mean, it worked earlier, otherwise I couldn't have taken a screenshot for my blog, right? Let me just show you that, how it's then supposed to look like. So this is in my blog. Here is the screenshot that basically shows you, in this case, I had one result report, and then you can kind of see the overview of your different results reports from the K8sGPT operator inside of Grafana dashboard. Now the benefit is of having all of the information inside of Grafana is that you will have all of your other dashboards also within Grafana, and then you can correlate different reports, different metrics as well. Just a quick recap. In this tutorial, we covered what is K8sGPT, how you can get started with K8sGPT, installing it, installing the CLI tool, and analyze your cluster for any errors and explain those errors, as well as installing the K8sGPT operator inside of your cluster for continuous in-cluster analysis and reports. Now, all of the resources that I've shared in this video, that I've used in this video, are linked below in the description. Also in the description is the full written tutorial if you prefer the written version of this video. Now, if this video was useful in one way or another to you, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for upcoming videos so that more people see my tutorials. I hope you have an amazing week, day, or evening, and to see you next time. Bye bye.